Picture this. The air is heavy with incense, so thick it clings to your lungs and leaves your throat raw. A single torch sputters against the stone wall, sending shadows racing across tapestries woven with scenes of conquest and divine right silken. Curtains sway, though no wind dares enter this chamber. As if the very fabric of the room is breathing with you, you are standing in the bedroom of a medieval monarch. A place that is not truly a sanctuary, but a stage where power is rehearsed and cruelty is performed. The walls do not echo with laughter, they trap whispers, cries, and the muffled weight of obedience. Perfumes mingle with sweat, the sweetness almost rotten, reminding you that luxury can become suffocating when it hides what no one dares to speak. Every object is charged with meaning. The bed massive and carved like a throne, the sheets dyed in crimson, as if the fabric remembers, blood spilled in silence, the gold goblet half full with spiced wine, the dagger resting too close. To where bodies lie, servants move like ghosts, never meeting eyes, careful not to let their footsteps betray their presence. They know one wrong glance could make them the next offering. In this theater of flesh, at the heart of the room, lies the monarch. Not just a ruler of land, but of every body who crosses this threshold. This is not intimacy, it is ritual. It is where loyalty is tested not by words, but by skin. Where devotion is measured by endurance. Where silence is demanded, even as souls fracture. Imagine, standing there, the chamber glowing in half-light. The monarch's gaze cold, yet expectant, knowing that no refusal is possible. Outside the city sleeps, thinking their sovereign rests in holy union. Yet here, behind velvet curtains, another truth unfolds. The body of the ruler is no longer merely flesh. It has become a weapon, a tool of domination, a performance meant to remind everyone from queens to courtiers to servants that power penetrates even the most private of spaces. A kiss can be command, a caress can be punishment, an embrace can become execution. The perfume thickens, the torch hisses, the silence between breaths grows unbearable. And as the curtain falls across this suffocating chamber, one question lingers in the darkness. What rituals did these monarchs demand when no one dared to say no? Take a moment to breathe. The weight of these walls is heavy, and the stories that echo here can be unsettling. If you wish to walk further with us into the forgotten chambers of history, into the places where power left its darkest marks, I invite you to stay close. Subscribe, join this journey. Let us move gently together through shadows and silence. Now, let us return to the chamber where the truth waits behind every closed door picture, a long corridor in French chateau candles flickering in iron sconces, the wax dripping slow as time itself. The courtiers wait restless, their eyes darting toward a heavy oak door behind which the king and his new bride have been sent. This is not a night of privacy. It is a public trial veiled by curtains. The consummation of marriage observed not with eyes, but with ears, with servants ordered to report every sound, every silence. By dawn, the queen's sheets will be displayed like evidence in a courtroom, proof of her untouched state, now broken for the sake of France. The smell of spiced wine lingers on the breath of courtiers, the rustle of silk, the cough of an aging noble. These sounds mingle with the faint muffled cries from beyond the door. What should be tender is turned into performance and humiliation. A child bride's body used as parchment on which legitimacy is written, shift the scene across the Channel to England. The Tudor court, glittering yet suffocating. Henry VIII towers in memory, not just for his 6 wives, but for the rituals he imposed in pursuit of heirs. Each marriage became a trial of fertility. Each bed, a laboratory of statecraft queens, were monitored. Their cycles noted, their failures whispered in corridors, and their bodies blamed when heirs did not come. At night, a queen might lie awake in the great bedchamber, incense thick in the air, tapestries looming like witnesses, her husband's heavy steps approaching like a sentence of judgment. For Henry, pleasure was never separate from power. His embrace was both demand and decree, a ritual where silence was safety and resistance was treason. Now let us drift eastward past oceans of stone and sand to the Ottoman harem, a world cloaked in rumor and desire here. The Sultan's private quarters shimmered with silks and perfumes, fountains trickling with rosewater, the air sweet, almost suffocating. Yet beneath this beauty was control, an empire within walls where women were groomed not for freedom, but for service. Every gesture was choreographed, every glance weighed in silence, their bodies offerings to a ruler whose touch could elevate them to Queen Mother or cast them into forgotten chambers. Imagine the stillness of night when a eunuch carried a silken cord to summon one chosen concubine to the Sultan's bedchamber, her body trembling as much from fear as from expectation. She would be bathed, perfumed, trained to move with grace. Yet nothing of this ritual was hers. It belonged to the sovereign. Smile could become her survival, a hesitation, her death. The harem was not merely indulgence, it was machinery of empire where flesh became politics, where intimacy was performance wrapped in rose-scented silence. Travel now to Central Europe where medieval lords wove superstition into their rituals of desire. Here fertility rites blended with cruelty, husbands demanding that wives sleep beneath relics of saints to guarantee conception, or forcing them into humiliating tests that left the body stripped of dignity. In castles where stone walls dripped with damp and smoke from torches blackened the air, women lay on furs, heavy with the musk of animals, their cries echoing like prayers unanswered. For peasants, these rituals were distant rumors. For nobles, they were chains disguised as duty. Each monarch, each lord used the bedroom as theater to reinforce power, to prove virility, to silence doubts, whispered in dark corners of their courts. The body was never private. It was evidence, witness, testimony, and for those who endured these rituals, the weight of silence was as heavy as the chains they never wore. Picture again, France, but not in splendor, rather in secrecy. A king obsessed with the idea of loyalty, demanding that courtiers prove devotion by surrendering their wives or daughters as tokens of fealty. A banquet would end in laughter. Torches dimmed, wine spilled, and behind doors perfumed with incense rituals unfolded that left families broken, yet voiceless. To resist was to lose. Everything, property, titles, perhaps even life itself. This was not devotion, it was control. Not love, but domination, ritualized beneath the veil of divine right. The cruelty lay not only in the act, but in its permanence, the whispered memories that followed. Servants cleaning sheets, nobles averting their eyes, young queens left staring into darkness long after the torches died. Psychologists would say these rituals were performances of power, obsession shaped by fear of weakness, rulers desperate to and prove potency, not only of body but of throne. To dominate in the bedroom was to dominate in the kingdom. The ritual became a mirror of monarchy itself, absolute, unchecked, demanding submission. And so each chamber becomes a camera shot in our minds. A French queen trembling under the weight of duty, an English monarch pacing like a predator, convinced that love and loyalty were measured by heirs alone. An Ottoman concubine kneeling before silks and gold, her silence a mask, her survival a central. European bride forced into relic-stained sheets, her tears hidden in the shadows. The perfume thickens the torches, hiss the echoes of whispers linger, as if the stones themselves are witnesses. What history recorded as ceremony was in truth cruelty. What was remembered as grandeur was often built on the silence of the powerless, and yet the darkest rituals remain half-hidden, buried in letters, destroyed in archives, erased from chronicles, because they revealed too much of the sovereign's humanity. And too much of their hunger. Imagine now, the curtain falling heavy and suffocating across one last chamber. A monarch waits within, smiling faintly, not from affection, but from expectation. The chosen companion steps forward, trembling the air sharp with incense, the silence deafening, and in that moment one question burns through the darkness. What secret ritual is about to unfold that no one will ever dare to write down? Picture a hall lit by hundreds of candles, their flames trembling in the draught. Like fearful hearts, at the center, a massive bed carved from oak draped in crimson velvet stands. Not as furniture, but as a stage. It is the wedding night of a young queen barely past childhood. Her face powdered her body, trembling beneath silks heavy, with the scent of rose oil and musk. The king sits upon the edge of the bed, his eyes fixed not on her, but on the crowd assembled, courtiers, priests, attendants, all summoned to bear witness to what should never be seen. For this monarch, the act of consummation is not private devotion, it is proof of sovereignty. The union of two bodies becomes a ritual of state. Every sigh, every motion scrutinized, recorded, whispered into chronicles, as if the bed were a courtroom and the queen's body the evidence. The girl cannot refuse, her silence is demanded, her fear dismissed as weakness. The courtiers murmur prayers, the priests nod solemnly. The monarch begins his performance with the dispassion of a judge delivering sentence. The candles flare, the silks rustle, the chamber echoes with sounds that should be sacred, yet here they are, desecrated, turned into spectacle. When dawn arrives, the sheets are lifted, inspected, paraded through corridors before the hungry eyes of the court. The queen lies still, her innocence shattered not only by her husband, but by the gaze of hundreds her. Tears staining the pillow like invisible ink that history would never record. This was not devotion, it was humiliation. Ritualized cruelty etched into memory, so deep it bled across generations. Now shift to another chamber, another king, a ruler infamous for his suspicion and obsession with control. In this chamber, the air is thicker, perfumed with incense, strong enough to choke torches, sputtering against smoke-stained walls. The monarch has summoned his closest courtiers, their loyalty to be tested, not in battle, but in flesh. He demands that noblemen offer their wives as tokens of fealty, that their silence prove obedience, that their humiliation seal allegiance. The women are led forward, pale faces hidden beneath veils, their bodies no longer in their own. The king watches from a gilded chair, eyes gleaming not with lust alone, but with satisfaction in domination. Each embrace is not passion, but punishment. Each caress a demonstration of absolute power. The silence is unbearable, broken only by the stifled sob of a girl too young to understand why survival means surrender. The courtier's force smiles, masks of obedience, even as shame burns into their bones. To resist is treason, to protest is death. And so the ritual unfolds again and again. Night after night, the chamber becoming a theater of cruelty, where loyalty is measured in silence and dignity is sacrificed. For survival, psychologists would say, this was obsession driven by terror of weakness, the monarch fearing betrayal so deeply. He reduced intimacy into a weapon, humiliation into spectacle. But for those trapped within the ritual, it was more than politics, it was a living nightmare. The air reeks of wine sweat and incense, torches hiss like serpents, the silks suffocate like chains, and when the final curtain falls, the victims remain in silence, their pain hidden, their dignity buried, their tears unseen. History remembers the monarch as powerful, ambitious, perhaps even glorious, but the walls remember the cries, the sheets. Remember the stains, the air remembers the scent of fear, and we are left to imagine the truth that the chronicles refuse to write, that behind the gilded portraits and marble statues, behind the hymns sung in cathedrals, there was another story unfolding. In shadows, a story of bodies turned into battlegrounds of intimacy, stripped into ritual of power, carved into flesh. And as we stand in the echo of these chambers, one haunting question lingers. If power can corrupt nations, what does it do when it enters? The bedroom, and claims the silence of the soul. When the torches were extinguished and the silks gathered away, the rituals did not end. They echoed. They lived on in the broken eyes of young queens who carried their shame into silence in the whispered prayers of servants who had witnessed too much in the heavy air of corridors that seemed to hold secrets within their stones. The monarch rose from these chambers unmarked, but those who had been used as proof tokens offerings were left hollow there. Bodies burdened by memories too dangerous to speak aloud. For individuals, the aftermath was a quiet devastation. A bride who failed to produce an heir became an object of ridicule. Her worth measured only in womb and silence. Her chambers colder with each passing year until dismissal or death. A nobleman who surrendered his wife for loyalty carried the wound of humiliation, his lineage scarred by whispers he could never erase. Even servants who scrubbed sheets or lit torches bore scars of memory, their hands forever stained by rituals they could not refuse to aid. And yet the rulers continued clothed in opulence. Jeweled crowns gleaming, their portraits painted serene, their legacies written in ink that refused to tell the whole truth. The contrast was staggering. In the great halls, banquets spilled with laughter, chalices overflowing, tapestries glowing with scenes of victory and piety. But in the silence of the private chamber, lives were unraveling. Psychological chains bound those who endured. Women learning to mask fear behind measured smiles, men numbing dignity beneath obedience, children forced to become adults in the most brutal of ways. Society too was shaped by these rituals, though it rarely spoke their names. Whispers spread through corridors and markets, tales of queens broken of kings, obsessed of rituals so grotesque they blurred into legend. Some of these stories became warnings, shaping how people viewed power and intimacy. Others were buried so deep they survived only in rumor, passed like a ghost story through generations' rebellion, sometimes sparked not only from taxes or war, but from the unseen cruelties of the chamber. When rulers became too consumed by obsession, when their rituals reached too far into the lives of nobles and families, the balance cracked. Resentment grew like rot beneath gilded walls, until revolt seemed inevitable. Legends were forged. Too, a queen remembered not for her silence, but for the night. She refused to submit for the whispers that she carried a blade hidden in her silks for the child born in secrecy who carried her bloodline beyond the reach of the monarch. These stories blurred history and myth, yet all carried the same truth, that silence was survival. But silence was also unbearable. The records that remain often reduce these lives to fragments, names, dates, alliances broken and renewed. But if you close your eyes, you can almost hear the echoes. The muffled weeping in chambers now empty, the rustle of gowns dragged across stone floors, the faint hiss of torches as secrets were swallowed by darkness, and above it all, the laughter of rulers untouched, untarnished by the rituals they demanded. Their power remained gilded, their palaces towering, their legacies praised in sermons and chronicles. But the true legacy lay in the silence of the victims, in the women who never spoke again of the nights they endured, in the men who bowed deeper than loyalty required, in the children who learned too early that love could be command and embrace could be punishment. This silence is its own record, an archive without parchment, one that lingers in the spaces history tries to ignore. For every golden crown there was a broken spirit. For every dynasty secured by ritual, there was a soul erased. And though time marched on, though kingdoms rose and fell, the stones, the tapestries, the very walls remained keepers of truths too dark for the chronicles. What followed was not just political order or dynastic survival, but generations, shaped by fear, obedience, and the knowledge that even the most intimate places could be turned into prisons of power. And as we step back from those chambers, as the torches fade to smoke and the silks dissolve into memory, one question still breathes. Through the silence, What remains when history praises the ruler but forgets the ruined lives left behind? Picture the castle now, centuries later, its stones cold, its chambers silent. The torches are gone, the perfumes long faded, yet the air still feels heavy as though it remembers. History has painted these monarchs in gold and crimson, their portraits serene, their crowns eternal, their names etched into chronicles as architects of kingdoms and faith. But behind the grandeur lay rituals that scarred, flesh and spirit rituals that turned intimacy into theater and love into law. These were not only the cruelties of a time gone by, they are reminders of what happens when power enters the most private of spaces, when bodies are claimed as proof, when silence is demanded as loyalty. The medieval monarch believed the body was not personal, but political. The queen's womb, a throne; the servant's silence, a contract; the noble's humiliation, a seal of fealty. And though centuries have passed, the crowns lie in glass cases and the castles stand as museums, the lesson remains that unchecked power will always seek to dominate not only land or wealth, but the soul itself. The victims left no monuments. Their cries were not carved into marble. Yet their absence speaks louder than stone. Their silence lingers like breath in empty corridors. We remember them not by name, but by the shadows they left, by the courage of survival, even when survival meant silence. To tell their story now is to return dignity where it was stripped, to see through the perfume and silk to the fear beneath, to honor those whose lives became the hidden cost of empire. And as the last echo fades from these chambers, as we close the curtains on a past both gilded and grotesque, one truth remains clear. The walls remember even when history forgets. In the medieval world, the bedroom of a monarch was never only a place of sleep or pleasure. It was a throne room behind curtains, a council chamber without witnesses, and at times a battlefield where flesh and spirit were tested until they broke. Privacy, as we know it, did not exist for kings and queens. Every gesture, every sigh, every union was a matter of state. Marriage was not born of love, but of strategy, a union of lands, armies, and fortunes. The bed became the stage where treaties were sealed and heirs were forged. The morning after a royal wedding, courtiers might gather to witness. The stained sheets, proof not of affection, but of virginity. A brutal display that reduced a young queen to evidence her body transformed into a parchment on which legitimacy was written. Failure in these rituals could shatter dynasties, whispering doubts into corridors that stretched from castle to cathedral. The monarch's bedroom was a place where power stripped away softness, a place where intimacy was rarely tender. More often it was performance, obligation, and sometimes punishment. Imagine the chill of a stone corridor at midnight, courtiers summoned to stand outside the royal chamber, straining their ears for proof of consummation, knowing that the fate of kingdoms depended on the sounds that drifted through the door. In France, in England, across the Holy Roman Empire, the same pattern unfolded. A new bride, trembling not before her husband alone, but before the watching eyes of an entire court hidden behind veils of ritual. What followed was rarely gentle. Many were no older than 14 or 15 children in the eyes of today, forced into beds where refusal was unthinkable. Their innocence turned into theater, for the crown perfume sheets were not symbols of romance, but of scrutiny. Every detail noted, every rumor. Dangerous? A queen who failed to produce an heir was branded cursed. A king who lingered too long in indulgence risked whispers of weakness. And in this world, obsession took root. Rituals grew darker, more elaborate, laced with fear, as monarchs demanded control not only over their courts, but over the very bodies that lay beside them. To lie in the bed of a sovereign was to surrender everything: choice, freedom, dignity. The velvet drapes, the jeweled goblets, the tapestries woven with saints and angels, all spoke of holiness and grandeur, yet beneath them the rituals often revealed desperation, cruelty, and a hunger for power that reached into the most intimate spaces of human life. The medieval monarch understood that power was fragile. Dynasties could crumble with a single rumor of impotence or infidelity, so the bed became both proof and prison, a place where the body became evidence and every sigh or silence could determine the fate of a nation. The people outside never knew the full truth. They saw the processions, the baptisms of heirs, the royal portraits gilded and serene. But within those chambers where torches burned low and incense masked the air, rituals unfolded that would haunt those forced to endure them. Some of these rituals were framed as sacred duty, others as entertainment. Some were hidden behind veils of secrecy, while others were paraded openly as theater of power, and always beneath the silks and jewels was fear. Fear of displeasing the ruler, fear of becoming the subject of whispers, fear of being cast aside, or worse. What was called devotion was often submission. What was praised as loyalty was often survival. What was seen as ceremony was in truth cruelty, written into flesh. This was the hidden world of medieval monarchs' bedrooms, not sanctuaries but stages where politics and desire fused into something darker, and what happened within these walls would shape the destinies of kingdoms and leave scars that history rarely dares to show.